The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, jolting me awake from the kind of sleep that comes after 14 hours of inventory management at the warehouse. My wife Cara wasn't in bed beside me, which wasn't unusual lately. She'd been pulling late nights for her marketing job, or so she claimed. "Brent, honey, I have to fly out tomorrow morning for that client meeting in Portland," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Remember I mentioned it last week?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I didn't remember, but then again, I'd been distracted by the mounting bills and her increasingly expensive shopping habits. "How long will you be gone?" "Just 3 days. Maybe 4 if the presentation goes well. This could be huge for my career." Something in her tone made my gut twist. After 16 years of marriage, you develop an instinct for when your spouse is feeding you bullshit. Cara had always been a terrible liar. She talked too fast and added unnecessary details. Tonight, she was practically speed-talking. "Which client again?" I asked, sitting up in our cramped bedroom. "Morrison Industries, the pharmaceutical account I've been chasing for months. Listen, I need to pack. My flight's at 6 a.m. The line went silent before I could respond. I stared at the phone, that familiar knot of suspicion tightening in my stomach. Morrison Industries. I'd never heard her mention that name before, and Cara loved to brag about potential clients. I found her in our spare bedroom, stuffing clothes into her good suitcase. The one we'd bought for our honeymoon to Niagara Falls, back when we were young and stupid enough to believe love conquered all. She was packing lingerie I'd never seen before, black lace things that definitely weren't her usual cotton briefs. "New underwear for a business trip?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She didn't look up. "I bought these months ago. A woman needs to feel confident in important meetings." "Right, because pharmaceutical executives are known for their lingerie inspections." "Don't be an ass, Brent. This is important." I watched her fold a red dress that still had tags on it. The price tag read $340, more than I made in a day breaking my back at Consolidated Logistics. "When did you buy that dress?" "Last weekend when I went shopping with Tessa." She finally met my eyes, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Fear? Guilt? "Look, I know money's tight, but this meeting could change everything for us." "Us? When's the last time anything you did was about us?" She slammed the suitcase shut. "I'm trying to build a future here, Brent. Someone has to think beyond your hopeless warehouse job." The words hit like a slap. I'd been working at Consolidated for 8 years, slowly climbing from floor worker to supervisor. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid our mortgage and kept food on the table. More importantly, it was honest work. Something I was starting to wonder if Cara remembered how to do. "Have a safe trip," I said, turning away before I said something we'd both regret. She left at 5:30 a.m. while I pretended to sleep. I heard her heels clicking on our hardwood floors, heard the front door close with a finality that made my chest tight. Through the bedroom window, I watched a silver BMW pull into our driveway. Not a taxi, not an Uber. A BMW I'd never seen before, with a driver I couldn't make out through the tinted windows. That's when I knew for certain that my wife was cheating on me. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, I felt oddly calm, like a man who'd finally gotten the answer to a question that had been eating at him for months. The late nights, the new clothes, the sudden interest in networking events. It all made perfect sense now. I called in sick to work, something I'd done maybe 3 times in 8 years. Then I did something I'd never imagined myself capable of. I called Cara's office. "Pinnacle Marketing, this is Rebecca." "Hi, this is Brent Alden, Cara's husband. She forgot some important documents for her Portland trip. Could you transfer me to her supervisor so I can arrange to get them to her?" "Oh, Mr. Alden, I'm sorry, but Cara doesn't work here anymore. She left about 3 months ago, didn't she tell you?" The world tilted sideways. 3 months. She'd been lying to me for 3 months, leaving every morning with her coffee mug and laptop bag, coming home with stories about difficult clients and office politics. Where the hell had she been going? "Mr. Alden, are you there?" "Yes, sorry. I must have misunderstood. Thank you." I hung up and sat in our kitchen, staring at the coffee mug she'd left in the sink. It had a chip on the handle from when she'd dropped it 2 years ago, but she'd refused to throw it away because it was from our 10th anniversary trip to Boston, back when she still pretended to love me. My phone buzzed with a text from Kara. "Landed safely. Meeting starts in an hour. Love you." Love you. The casual cruelty of those 2 words made my hands shake with rage. She was somewhere with another man, probably laughing about how gullible her warehouse worker husband was, and she had the balls to text me "love you" like it meant something. I spent the next hour pacing our small house, looking at everything with new eyes: the credit card bills she'd been handling lately, the new gym membership she'd insisted on, the way she'd started showering immediately when she came home from her job. How had I been so blind? By noon, I'd made a decision that would have shocked the old Brent Alden, the trusting husband who believed his wife when she said she was working late. I drove to the Sprint store and bought a phone monitoring app. $50 to find out what my wife was really up to. Installing spyware on your spouse's phone is probably the most pathetic thing a man can do. It's an admission that your marriage is over, that trust has been replaced by surveillance. But as I synced the app with Kara's phone using our shared iCloud account, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: control. The first batch of messages downloaded within minutes. My hands were steady as I opened them, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs. The first text thread was with someone named Miles. "Can't wait to have you all to myself for 4 days. Brent still doesn't suspect anything?" Kara's response: "He's completely clueless. Poor bastard thinks I'm in Portland closing deals. If only he knew what kind of deals I'm really making." Miles: "What about the money situation? You said he's been asking questions about the credit cards." Kara: "I've got it handled. He's too stupid to figure out what I've been doing. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll be long gone." Miles: "You sure he won't cause problems when you ask for the divorce?" Kara: "Brent's a coward. He'll roll over and let me take whatever I want, especially once I tell people about his drinking problem." I didn't have a drinking problem. I had maybe 3 beers a week, usually while watching football on Sundays, but I could see the angle: paint me as an unstable alcoholic to justify taking me for everything I was worth. There were dozens more messages, going back weeks, plans for draining our joint savings account, discussions about which assets would be easiest to hide, jokes about my pathetic job and my boring personality. They'd even given me a nickname, the Warehouse Zombie. But the worst part wasn't the mockery or the theft. It was the audio message Kara had sent Miles the night before she left. I played it 3 times, each listen making me angrier than the last. "God, Miles, I can't wait to be done with this charade. Do you know he actually asked me about my new underwear? Like he has any right to question what I do with my body. 16 years of pretending to love that loser, and I'm finally ready to cash out. He's got about $40,000 in his 401k, plus his half of the house equity. Not bad for a warehouse supervisor who peaked in high school." Miles's voice in the background: "What if he fights the divorce?" "He won't. Brent's the kind of man who apologizes when someone else steps on his foot. I've got him so beaten down, he'll probably thank me for leaving him." They both laughed, actually laughed at the idea of destroying my life. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that, staring at Kara's coffee mug with the chipped handle. The old Brent would have called her, crying and begging her to come home and work things out. The old Brent would have blamed himself, wondered what he'd done wrong, how he could have been a better husband. But the old Brent had just faded, listening to his wife mock 16 years of marriage. The new Brent had different plans. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at our kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, making lists. Assets, bank accounts, credit cards, shared debts, everything Kara thought she could take from me. By morning, I had a plan. First stop, Hancock County Savings and Loan, where we'd banked for 10 years. I walked in at 9 a.m. sharp wearing my best shirt and the tie I'd worn to my father's funeral. Margaret Thornton, the branch manager, had handled our mortgage paperwork and knew us both by name. "Brent, good to see you. How's Kara?" "That's actually what I need to talk to you about, Margaret. I have reason to believe someone may be trying to access our accounts fraudulently." Her expression shifted from friendly to professional. "What kind of fraudulent access?" I pulled out my phone and played one of the audio messages I'd recorded, Kara discussing transferring money to an account I'd never heard of. Margaret's face went pale. "I need to freeze all our joint accounts immediately," I said, "and I want to be notified of any attempts to access them." "Of course. We'll need to file a fraud report, and you'll need to come in with Kara to—" "Kara's out of town on business. I'll have her call when she gets back." Margaret spent the next hour helping me secure our finances. Every joint account frozen, every credit card flagged, a hold placed on our safety deposit box. By the time I left the bank, Kara's financial war chest had been reduced to whatever cash she had in her purse. But I wasn't done. Not even close. My next stop was Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar 3 blocks from the warehouse where the guys went to complain about their wives and watch sports. I found Jim Kowalski nursing a beer and reading the sports page. Big Jim had worked with me for 6 years, and despite being built like a linebacker, he was one of the gentlest men I knew. He was also fiercely loyal and had never liked Kara. "Brent, what brings you to Murphy's at 10 in the morning? Finally decide to start drinking your problems away?" "I need a favor, Jim. A big one." I told him everything. The fake job, the affair, the plans to rob me blind. Jim's face darkened with each detail, his massive hands clenching into fists. "That cheating snake," he growled. "What do you need me to do?" "I need backup, and maybe some muscle if things get ugly." "You got it, brother. What's the plan?" I pulled out a notebook and showed him the research I'd done on Miles Denton. Real estate consultant, divorced twice, lived in a flashy condo by the river. Drove a leased BMW and had a reputation around town as a smooth-talking player. "We're going to make his life very uncomfortable," I said. Jim grinned. I liked the sound of that. That afternoon, we conducted surveillance. Jim had borrowed his brother's pickup truck, and we parked across from Miles's condo complex, watching the comings and goings. At 2:30, the silver BMW pulled into the parking lot. I watched through binoculars as Miles got out, followed by my wife. Seeing them together in person was different than knowing about it intellectually. Kara looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was laughing at something Miles had said, touching his arm, looking up at him with genuine affection. It was like watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You okay?" Jim asked. "I'm fine. Let's see what they're up to." We followed them to the Riverside Motel, a seedy place on Route 9 that rented rooms by the hour. They checked in under the name Mr. and Mrs. Davidson. I could see the registration from across the parking lot through my binoculars. "Room 237. "Want me to kick the door down?" Jim asked. "Catch them in the act?" "No. That's what the old Brent would have done. The new Brent has better ideas." I spent the next 2 hours taking pictures. Miles and Kara entering the motel. Their cars in the parking lot. The room number clearly visible. Time stamps on every photo. By the time they emerged, disheveled and obvious, I had enough evidence to bury them both. But as we prepared to leave, a woman approached our truck. She was tall and blonde, wearing expensive clothes and a furious expression. I recognized her from Kara's Facebook photos. Tessa Morrison, Kara's best friend and frequent shopping companion. "Excuse me," she said, tapping on Jim's window. "Are you guys private investigators or something?" Jim looked at me. I shook my head slightly. "Just waiting for a friend," Jim said. "You lost, lady." "I'm looking for my boyfriend." Silver BMW, about 6 feet tall, thinks he's God's gift to women. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Miles Denton? Her eyes widened. You know him? I know he's in room 237 with my wife. The color drained from Tessa's face. Your wife? You're Brent? Guilty as charged. Tessa stared at the motel room, then back at me. That bastard told me he was meeting a client, and Kara said she was in Portland on business. Looks like we've both been lied to, I said. Want to grab a cup of coffee and compare notes? An hour later, I knew everything. Tessa had been sleeping with Miles for 6 months, thinking she was his only side piece. She'd introduced him to Kara at a party, never imagining they'd start an affair. Miles had been playing both women, promising each of them a future while planning to disappear with Kara and my money. He's been asking me for loans, Tessa said, stirring her coffee with shaking hands. Said he had a big deal coming through but needed bridge financing. I gave him $8,000 last month. Let me guess, he promised to pay you back with interest? Double interest. What an idiot I am. You're not an idiot. You trusted someone who didn't deserve it. We all make that mistake. Tessa looked at me with something like respect. Kara always said you were boring, but you don't seem boring to me. I'm full of surprises. By the time we parted ways, I had a new ally and a much clearer picture of what I was dealing with. Miles wasn't just stealing my wife, he was running a con game on multiple women, using charm and false promises to extract money and favors. Kara wasn't his first victim, and she wouldn't be his last. That evening, I got a text from Kara. Meeting went great. Looks like I'll need to stay an extra day to close the deal. Miss you. I texted back, miss you too. Take all the time you need. Then I called my lawyer. David Chen had handled our house purchase and Kara's father's estate. He was expensive, but thorough, and more importantly, he was available for an emergency consultation. Brent, good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I need to file for divorce, David, and I need to do it right. I spent 2 hours in his office, laying out everything I'd discovered. The fake job, the affair, the financial planning, the audio recordings. David listened without judgment, taking notes and asking pointed questions. This is a strong case, he said finally. Adultery, fraud, conspiracy to commit theft. With this evidence, you could probably get the court to award you everything. I don't want everything. I just want what's mine, and I want them to pay for what they've done. What did you have in mind? I smiled. I want to give them exactly what they're planning to give me. Nothing. David raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous game, Brent. Are you sure you want to play it? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Kara came home on Friday afternoon, full of stories about her successful business trip. She'd closed the Morrison Industries deal, she said, and they were so impressed they wanted to offer her a full-time position with a company car and expense account. That's wonderful, honey, I said, not looking up from my newspaper. When do you start? Monday. Can you believe it? After all these months of struggling, everything's finally coming together. I watched her unpack her suitcase, noting the clothes that hadn't been worn and the new lingerie that had obviously seen action. She was humming while she worked, happier than I'd seen her in years. It was almost enough to make me feel guilty about what I was planning. Almost. Oh, I ran into Margaret Thornton at the grocery store, I said casually. She mentioned something about our accounts being frozen, probably just a computer glitch. Kara's hands stilled on a silk blouse. Frozen? What do you mean frozen? She said there was some kind of fraud alert. I told her it was probably nothing, but she wanted us both to come in Monday morning to sort it out. Fraud alert? Kara's voice was carefully controlled. What kind of fraud alert? Something about unusual activity patterns. You know how paranoid banks are these days. I folded my newspaper and looked at her directly. You haven't been using the cards for anything unusual, have you? Of course not. Just normal expenses. Good. Then we shouldn't have any problems clearing it up. That night, Kara claimed to have a headache and went to bed early. I heard her whispering into her phone from the bathroom, but the conversation was too muffled to make out. I didn't need to hear it anyway. I knew she was panicking, trying to figure out how to access money that was no longer available. Saturday morning, I announced I was going fishing with Jim. Instead, we drove to Miles's condo complex and waited. At 10:15, Kara's Honda pulled into the parking lot. She was alone and she looked stressed. "Showtime," I told Jim. We followed her to Miles's door and listened from the hallway. Their voices were raised, angry, desperate. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen?" Miles was saying. "I don't know. Brent said it's a fraud alert, but I think he knows something. He's been acting strange since I got back." "Strange how?" "Too calm, too nice. It's not like him." Miles laughed bitterly. "Maybe your boring husband isn't as stupid as you thought. He's not smart enough to figure this out on his own. Someone must have told him something." "Like what?" "We've been careful." "I don't know, but we need to move fast. If he's on to us, we need to get out of here before he can do anything about it." "With what money? You said yourself the accounts are locked." "I have some cash saved. And you said Tessa gave you $8,000. "I already spent most of that." "On what?" "None of your business." Their argument continued for another 10 minutes, getting nastier and more desperate. I recorded every word on my phone, building my case one conversation at a time. Finally, Kara stormed out. She was crying, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the audio message where she'd called me a pathetic loser, and the sympathy evaporated. Jim and I followed her to Murphy's Tavern, where she sat in her car in the parking lot, making phone calls. Through my binoculars, I could see her growing more frantic with each conversation, probably calling banks, trying to find out exactly what was frozen and why. "She's starting to figure it out," Jim observed. "Good. Let her sweat." That evening, I made dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, Kara's favorite. She picked at her food, distracted and anxious. "Everything okay?" I asked. "You seem upset." "Just work stress. The new job is going to be demanding." "Speaking of work, I should probably update our insurance beneficiaries now that you're changing companies. Do you have the contact information for your new employer?" Kara's fork clattered against her plate. "Why do you need that?" "For the insurance forms. They need to verify employment for the spousal coverage." I don't have those details yet. HR said they'd send everything next week." "No problem. We can wait." But I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how to maintain her lie when there was no new job to verify. The web of deception was getting too complex to manage, and the pressure was starting to show. Sunday morning, Kara announced she was going shopping with Tessa. I knew better. Tessa had already told me she was done with both Kara and Miles. Instead, I followed Kara to the Riverside Motel, where she met Miles in the parking lot. This time, I didn't just watch. I got out of my truck and walked straight up to them. "Well, well," I said. "Fancy meeting you here." Kara's face went white. Miles stepped protectively in front of her, puffing out his chest like a rooster. "Brent, this isn't what it looks like," Kara stammered. "Really?" "Because it looks like my wife is about to check into a motel with her boyfriend. What am I missing?" Miles found his voice. "Look, buddy, maybe we should talk about this like adults." "Adults?" I laughed. "Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back planning to rob them blind. Adults don't lie about fake business trips and fake jobs." Kara gasped. "How did you know about Morrison Industries, the company you supposedly work for but quit 3 months ago? Lucky guess." The fight went out of her like air from a punctured balloon. She sagged against Miles's BMW, all her careful lies crumbling at once. Miles, however, was just getting started. "You want to know the truth, Brent? Your wife's been miserable for years. She deserves better than a hopeless warehouse worker who can't even afford to take her on a decent vacation." "You're right," I said. "She does deserve better. She deserves someone honest, someone loyal, someone who won't steal her best friend's money while sleeping with her behind her back. Miles's face flushed red. What are you talking about? Ask Tessa about the $8,000 you borrowed. Oh wait, you can't. She's not speaking to either of you anymore. Kara stared at Miles in horror. You took money from Tessa? While you were with me? It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I interrupted. Miles here is running a con game, sweetheart. You're not his first victim, and you wouldn't have been his last. He's been playing both of you, taking money from Tessa while planning to disappear with you and my assets. That's not true, Miles said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Then why don't you tell Kara about Jennifer Walsh from Portland, or Susan Martinez from Bangor? I did some research, Miles. You've got quite a track record. The color drained from Miles's face. Kara looked between us, understanding dawning in her eyes. You bastard, she whispered. You've been lying to me too. Kara, let me explain. Explain what? That I threw away my marriage for another liar? She started crying then, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But the bigger part of me, the part that had listened to her mock our marriage and plan my financial destruction, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Kara, you're going to pack your things and move out. I've already filed for divorce, and with the evidence I have, you'll be lucky to get anything. Miles, you're going to stay away from both of us, or I'll make sure every woman in 3 counties knows exactly what kind of man you are. You can't do this, Miles blustered. You can't just watch me. I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording of their conversation from the day before. Their voices filled the parking lot, discussing how to access frozen accounts and escape before I could do anything about it. I've got hours of recordings, I said. Phone calls, text messages, financial records, enough to prove fraud, adultery, and conspiracy. So unless you want to explain all this to a judge, I suggest you both disappear from my life, permanently. Miles grabbed Kara's arm. Come on, we don't have to listen to this. But Kara pulled away from him. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. She looked at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for years. Respect. I'm sorry, Brent. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am sorry. So am I, Kara. Sorry it took me so long to figure out who you really are. Monday morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. My crew at the warehouse noticed I seemed different, more confident, more decisive, but I didn't explain. I just did my job, managed my team, and waited for the next phase of my plan to unfold. Kara had moved out Sunday night, taking only her clothes and personal items. She'd left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter with a note. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope someday you can find peace. I threw the note away without reading it twice. The ring went into a drawer with other relics from my former life. Tuesday afternoon, my lawyer called with good news. The divorce papers have been served, and Kara's not contesting anything. She's agreed to your terms. She keeps her car and personal belongings. You keep everything else. What about Miles? Funny you should ask. Seems Mr. Denton has been having some professional difficulties. His real estate license is under review by the state board, and his employer has launched an investigation into his business practices. Really? How unfortunate. David chuckled. Yes, very unfortunate. Apparently, several former clients have come forward with complaints about misrepresented properties and missing earnest money deposits. I hadn't had anything to do with those complaints, but I wasn't surprised they'd surfaced. Men like Miles always left a trail of victims behind them. Sometimes it just took one person asking the right questions to bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor to the warehouse. Tessa Morrison stood in my office doorway, looking nervous and apologetic. I hope you don't mind me coming here, she said. I wanted to thank you. For what? For opening my eyes. About Miles. About everything. She sat down across from my desk. I got my money back, by the way. Turns out he'd been depositing it in a separate account, probably planning to disappear with it eventually. How did you manage that? I threatened to press charges for fraud. Amazing how quickly men like Miles cooperate when they're facing jail time. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. What are you going to do now? Start over, I guess. Maybe be more careful about who I trust. She paused. What about you? Any regrets? About the divorce? None whatsoever. I meant about how you handled it. Some people might say you were pretty ruthless. I thought about that for a moment. The old Brent would have agonized over that question, worried about being too harsh, too unforgiving. But the old Brent would have let himself be robbed and humiliated without fighting back. They made their choices, I said finally. I just made sure there were consequences. Tessa nodded approvingly. Good for you. Too many people let others walk all over them. It's refreshing to meet someone who fights back. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about consequences. For 16 years, I'd enabled Kara's selfishness by being too accommodating, too willing to overlook her flaws. I'd been so afraid of conflict that I'd let her walk all over me, until she'd convinced herself I was weak and stupid. Maybe I had been weak, but I wasn't stupid, and I definitely wasn't the same man she'd married. Thursday evening, I was having dinner at Murphy's Tavern when Jim Kowalski slid into the booth across from me. Heard some interesting gossip today, he said, signaling the waitress for a beer. Oh? Seems Miles Denton's been evicted from his fancy condo. Couldn't make the rent payments after his real estate license got suspended. That's too bad. Yeah, real tragedy. Word is, he's been sleeping in his car for the past week. BMW's nice, but it's not much of an apartment. I cut into my steak, considering this information. What about Kara? Living with her sister in Brewer, working at some telemarketing place for minimum wage. Jim grinned. Funny how things work out, isn't it? Hilarious. You don't sound very happy about it. I looked up from my plate. I'm not happy, Jim. I'm satisfied. There's a difference. What's the difference? Happy is what I'll be when I find someone who actually deserves my trust. Satisfied is knowing that the people who betrayed me got exactly what they had coming. Jim raised his beer in a toast. To getting what you deserve. To getting what you deserve, I agreed. Friday afternoon brought the final piece of the puzzle. David Chen called to tell me the divorce was final. Kara had signed all the papers without requesting any modifications. She also wanted me to give you a message, David said. She said to tell you she understands why you did what you did, and she doesn't blame you for it. Generous of her. There's something else. She's moving to Florida next month, taking a job with her cousin's marketing firm in Tampa. Good. A fresh start will do her good. What about you, Brent? What's next? I looked around my small office at Consolidated Logistics, at the stacks of shipping manifests and inventory reports that had been my world for 8 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. It was mine. I think I'll stay right where I am, I said, for now. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went fishing. Not with Jim, not with anyone else. Just me, a rented boat, and Sebago Lake stretching out like glass under the morning sun. I caught 3 bass and threw them all back. It wasn't about the fish anyway. It was about the silence, the peace, the feeling of being exactly where I belonged, without having to apologize for it or justify it to anyone. As I was loading my gear back into the truck, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Kara. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know I'm getting help. Therapy. Trying to figure out how I became someone I don't recognize. You were right about everything. I'm sorry it took losing you to realize it. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. 3 months later, life had settled into a comfortable routine. The divorce was ancient history, The warehouse was running smoother than ever, and I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a librarian named Sarah who had kind eyes and didn't seem to have any hidden agendas. I was thinking about asking Sarah to dinner when my phone rang on a Tuesday evening. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer anyway. "Brent, it's Tessa Morrison." "Tessa, how are you?" "I'm good. Really good, actually. Listen, I'm calling because I thought you should know. Miles Denton was arrested yesterday." I set down my coffee mug. "Arrested for what?" "Wire fraud. Turns out he's been running investment scams all over New England. The FBI had been building a case for months, and your evidence helped them connect some dots." "My evidence?" "The financial records you gathered during the divorce. Your lawyer shared them with law enforcement when they subpoenaed his files. Miles had been using the same patterns with multiple victims: fake business deals, promises of big returns, then disappearing with the money. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and vindication. How long is he looking at? 5 to 10 years if he's convicted. And with the evidence they have, conviction is pretty much guaranteed. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about justice and consequences. I hadn't set out to destroy Miles Denton. I just wanted to protect myself and expose the truth. But sometimes the truth has a way of spreading, touching lives you never expected it to reach. The next morning, I was reviewing shipping schedules when my secretary buzzed me. "Brent, there's a woman here to see you. Says it's personal." I looked up to see Kara standing in my office doorway. She looked different, thinner, older, wearing clothes I'd never seen before. Her hair was shorter, and she wasn't wearing the expensive makeup she'd favored during our marriage. "Hello, Brent." "Kara, I thought you were in Florida." "I was. I came back to testify at Miles's trial." She gestured to the chair across from my desk. "May I?" I nodded, curious despite myself. "I wanted to apologize," she said once she was seated. "Not the quick, meaningless apology I gave you before, but a real one. What I did to you, to our marriage, was unforgivable." "You're right. It was. I've been in therapy for 4 months now, trying to understand how I became someone capable of such cruelty. I don't have any excuses, but I think I have some explanations." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm listening." "I was angry. At you, at our life, at the fact that we weren't rich or glamorous or exciting. I felt trapped. And instead of talking to you about it, I started looking for someone to blame. You were the easiest target. So you decided to cheat and steal from me? I convinced myself I deserved better, that you were holding me back, that if I could just get enough money together, I could start over somewhere else and be happy." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out Miles had the same plan, except he was going to leave me behind too. What do you want from me, Kara?" "Nothing. I know it's too late for forgiveness, and I wouldn't deserve it anyway. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I threw away. You were a good husband, Brent. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." "Yes, I did." She flinched at my bluntness, but didn't argue. "I also wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For not destroying me completely. You could have pressed criminal charges, could have made sure I went to prison along with Miles. But you didn't." "I considered it." "Why didn't you?" I thought about that question. "Because I'm not you, Kara. I don't take pleasure in destroying people, even people who've hurt me. I just wanted you out of my life. And now I am." "Yes, you are." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Are you happy?" "Getting there." "Good. You deserve to be happy." After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about closure and second chances. I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not for what Kara had lost, but for who she'd become in the process of losing it. That evening, I called Sarah the librarian and asked her to dinner. She said yes. 6 months later, Sarah and I were engaged. Not because we were desperate or lonely, but because we'd found something real together: trust, respect, and the kind of love that doesn't require lies or games or hidden agendas. The wedding was small, just family and close friends at a little church in Freeport. Jim Kowalski was my best man, and he gave a toast that brought down the house. To Brent and Sarah, proof that good things happen to people who know the difference between what they want and what they deserve. As I danced with my new wife under strings of lights in the church fellowship hall, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the anger, the careful planning of my revenge. It all seemed like something that had happened to someone else. But it hadn't happened to someone else. It had happened to me, and it had changed me in ways I was still discovering. I was more cautious now, but also more confident, more selective about who I trusted, but more generous with those who earned that trust. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so good that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. 2 years after my divorce from Kara, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Sarah and I were living in a bigger house now, with a garden she tended and a workshop where I built furniture in my spare time. Life was good, better than I'd ever imagined it could be. The invitation was from Tessa Morrison, who was marrying a veterinarian she'd met in a grief counseling group. I'd kept in touch with Tessa sporadically, and I was genuinely happy for her. She'd rebuilt her life after the Miles disaster, starting her own small business and learning to trust again. Sarah and I attended the wedding, a lovely outdoor ceremony in Tessa's backyard. During the reception, Tessa pulled me aside. "I have news," she said, "about Kara." "Oh?" "She's getting married too, to a teacher she met in Florida. Apparently he's a really good guy, patient, kind, honest, the opposite of Miles in every way. Good for her. She wanted me to tell you something if I ever saw you. She said to say thank you." "Thank you for what?" "For showing her what real consequences look like. She said it was the wake-up call she needed to change her life." I considered this information while watching Sarah laugh with some of the other guests. My wife had a wonderful laugh, genuine and unguarded. It was one of the first things I'd noticed about her. "I'm glad she found someone good," I said finally, and I meant it. "Really?" "Really. I don't wish her any harm, Tessa. I just didn't want her in my life anymore." And now she's not. No, now she's not. Later that evening, as Sarah and I drove home through the Maine countryside, she asked me what Tessa and I had been discussing. "Old history," I said. "Nothing important." "Are you sure? You seem thoughtful." I reached over and took her hand. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky how?" "Lucky that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened." Sarah squeezed my fingers. "I love you, Brent Alden." "I love you too, Sarah Alden." As we pulled into our driveway, I saw Jim Kowalski's truck parked in front of our house. He was sitting on the front porch with a 6-pack of beer, waiting for us to get home. "Figured you might want to celebrate," he called out as we got out of the car. "Nice wedding, by the way." "Thanks, Jim. How long have you been waiting?" "About an hour. Your neighbor Mrs. Patterson kept me company. Nice lady. She made me cookies." Sarah laughed and went inside to change clothes. Jim and I sat on the porch, drinking beer and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "You know what I realized today?" Jim said after a while. "What's that?" "You never did get your revenge on Kara and Miles." I looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I exposed their affair, prevented them from stealing my money, and made sure they faced consequences for their actions." "That's not revenge, brother. That's justice. Revenge would have been destroying them for the sake of destroying them." "What's the difference?" "Justice is about making things right. Revenge is about making things hurt." Jim took a long pull from his beer. "You chose justice, even when you had every right to choose revenge. That says something about who you are." I thought about that as the last light faded from the sky. Maybe Jim was right. Maybe what I'd thought of as revenge had actually been something else entirely, a refusal to let other people's choices define my future. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said. "What?" "I got everything I wanted anyway. A good marriage, a peaceful life, the respect of people I care about. Turns out that's worth more than any revenge could have been." "Damn right it is." Sarah came back outside wearing jeans and one of my old flannel shirts, carrying a plate of leftover wedding cake. She settled into the porch swing beside me, and I put my arm around her shoulders. "What are you two philosophers discussing out here?" she asked. "The meaning of life," Jim said solemnly. "And what did you conclude?" "That your husband's a lucky bastard," Jim replied, which made Sarah laugh. We sat there until well past midnight, talking about everything and nothing, surrounded by the comfortable sounds of a small town settling in for the night. It occurred to me that this was what happiness actually looked like. Not constant excitement or drama, but quiet contentment with people who knew your story and loved you anyway. As Jim was leaving, he paused at his truck. "Hey, Brent?" "Yeah?" "For what it's worth, I think you handled the whole thing perfectly. You didn't let them destroy you, and you didn't destroy yourself trying to destroy them. That takes wisdom. Or stubbornness. Same thing sometimes." After he drove away, Sarah and I went inside to our quiet house, our comfortable bed, our uncomplicated life. As I was turning off the lights, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. Older than I'd been 2 years ago, but somehow younger too. The lines of constant worry were gone from around my eyes, replaced by something that looked like peace. The man in the mirror had been betrayed, lied to, and nearly robbed of everything he'd worked for. But he'd survived it, learned from it, and built something better from the wreckage. He'd chosen justice over revenge, healing over hatred, and love over bitterness. He'd chosen well. I turned off the light and went to join my wife, leaving the past where it belonged, behind me, where it could never hurt me again.